Hey you guys, what's up? I'm Ashley from heavenathome.org, and this is the Heaven at Home podcast, where my goal is to encourage you in your personal growth journey while being open, honest, and owning my story. We have faith-based conversations and tackle a bunch of different tough topics. Check out the description to follow me and learn more. Remember, you are fully known and deeply loved. Let's do this. Hey you guys. So today I'm going to be talking about the problem with trying to be perfect. And as you all know, this is a faith-based personal growth podcast. So I feel like the faith-based part could be one topic and the personal growth part could be another one. But just to start off, I wanted to share the definition of what perfect is. I just looked it up really quick so we could kind of get our brains going here. But it says, that perfect is an adjective having all the required or desirable elements, qualities, or characteristics as good as it is possible to be, absolute, complete, to make something completely free from faults or defects, or as close to such a condition as possible. So because there is like two ways to go about this topic, I wanted to separate what I am going to be sharing with you guys and what I'm not trying to dive too much into. There is one specific case where I feel like it is beautiful and valuable to want to be perfect. I think that it is a good thing to strive for perfection, and that is only in the case of our spiritual lives. When I think of being perfect in a spiritual sense and taking care of our soul, I think of being made right with God. I think of righteousness and holiness. And in order to achieve that kind of perfection, there's a substantial amount of us that has to surrender to the Holy Spirit and work with Him hand in hand. And it's really by His grace and mercy that we're able to, achieve that we're actually capable of being holy and pure and all the characteristics and all the good things that come along with that. So in the spiritual sense, where we are relying on our intimacy and relationship with God and depending on Him to be perfect, I think that is perfectly okay. But the topic that I'm going to be talking to you guys today about is the problem with trying to be perfect in pretty much every other sense. So I think of trying to do things perfectly, trying to be a perfect person or be perceived as a perfect person, trying to do things at exactly the perfect time and looking for perfect outcomes. And I'm just going to give a couple of examples to kind of get you guys thinking about areas in your own lives where this could be a thing. But there's a lot of relationships I'm in and a lot of projects I work on. I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I am a vocalist, I'm a blogger, I'm a podcaster, I'm a processor at work, and there are so many tasks that are associated with each of those things. And of course, it is a good goal to want to do those things well. What I want to get you guys thinking about is just like the different domains of your own life where you might be getting stuck trying to achieve something that's not necessarily possible. Me as a person, I don't typically let perfection get in the way of me doing things, and it might sound not so great, but I'm kind of like a do it now and regret it later kind of person. I'm not blind or delusional to the ways that I'm not the most skilled or as much of an expert as somebody else, but I definitely do the best I can with what I have, and I feel like that usually gives me enough motivation to make an attempt and put in an effort. Like, for example, when it comes to music and producing and trying to be a vocalist, there are a couple projects I've put out there where I feel like it's very obvious that I'm an amateur and I don't know what I'm doing. And all I know is enough to know that something doesn't sound right or something could be a little bit better. But I use that to learn, and assuming that I'm all I've got, writing a song or something like that, like I just use that and I learn from that. And so I don't typically get stuck. I have that mindset because I know my skills are limited. I feel like I have a realistic view of that. And even when it comes to blogging and podcasting, there was a point where I didn't know how to do this. I did a bunch of research. I studied. I learned from a lot of experts. And there's a huge part of creating content that has been trial and error. And I feel like if I got stuck in the very beginning, trying to be where I am now back then, I never would have gotten here. And I think my biggest thing that I want to encourage you guys to pursue more than perfection is to pursue progress. And I'm probably going to say that a couple times today. But when you're going about your life, and performing in different roles and relationships, have a growth mindset. It's almost 100% certain that things can always be better and things can always be improved, but it's better to do something rather than nothing. And that's one of the biggest things that I want to stress, is that there's something about trying to be perfect that paralyzes us and it keeps us from doing anything. And I feel like if you're giving 100% and you're doing your best, that's really the biggest thing that matters. And I genuinely feel like that's the biggest indicator of success in the future. But just to be, I guess, a little bit more relatable, because I'm not trying to come off like, oh, this is the issue, trying to be perfect and I get this right all the time. No, I still have like some areas where I'm susceptible to the same thing. And I've noticed that I do have a weak spot. And this happens to me in different contexts. I'm not sure why. I don't necessarily care about changing the way that I am until someone perceives me or expects me to show up in a certain kind of way, so good or bad. The second I feel like I'm being perceived a certain way, that's kind of what keeps me. So, for example, if I know and I'm regularly engaging with someone who strives for perfection, who wants perfection, desires perfection, me, even though that's not necessarily my intrinsic motivation, because I know that's the other person's, I take on that to a point where it paralyzes me also. Like, it will affect me the same way it affects that other person. I have a habit of like adopting other people's mindsets, and I'm actually trying to work on that because I'm realizing that affects me a lot more than I ever noticed. Like, this is just like kind of like a recent thing. But anyway, I digress. I'm not really trying to get into the hyper-analyzing therapeutic mindset right now. But okay, so anyway, that afforded me an opportunity to really dissect what happens within me when I all of a sudden feel like I have to be perfect, or, along those other examples, do something perfect, create perfection, put out perfection, act perfect, do things at a perfect time, like all the things and all the ways that could be applied. It creates huge obstacles for me. And I wanted to kind of illustrate those and put those out there and make them very, very clear, so that if you ever notice the symptoms of it, you might be able to get to the root of it and be like, oh, this is me trying to be perfect and I need to stop that right now. The biggest thing that I want to do with this episode is encourage you to think about things differently, reframe your brain and change your language and adjust your mindset, so that instead of striving for perfection, you can strive for progress. So some of the issues that come about, like just to name a couple, and there are probably much more that we can come up with, but the main issues that I've realized for myself in trying to be perfect is, number one, setting an unrealistic expectation. So for me, I think about like some of the music projects that I've tried to create. I am a vocalist. I do sing. I can recognize when something's on key, off key, on pitch, off pitch. I am educated enough to know when something doesn't sound right, but I'm not necessarily educated or skilled enough to create in that field. I can only make do with, like instrumentals or, I don't know, like sound effects from GarageBand or something like that. So if I were striving, for example, with a music project where, I've written a song and I want to produce the music and all this stuff, it would be an unrealistic expectation to assume that I can just pull out like some kind of music program and put a song together. Like, I know nothing about composition. I know nothing about chords or creating music. I know nothing about sound engineering. So there's like a couple projects I've put out there, and I don't consider them extremely official, but I do feel like they were emulating the best of what I had with what I knew. And even though I can be very, very nitpicky, and that's perfectly fine, like I can notice when things can be better, I just kind of use each project, the pros and the cons, as like a way to educate in the future. But that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest issues that I see is that when you're trying to be perfect or do something perfectly, you set an unrealistic expectation and you don't give yourself an opportunity to learn as you go. It's almost like you have to do all this hidden work and all this invisible work alone and first before you even try. And I feel like that's honestly just a waste of time. When it comes to even like having expectations of ourselves or having expectations of people, perfectionists usually set really impossible high standards. And that can lead to a constant sense of dissatisfaction and even discouragement, because what you want isn't actually achievable. You don't give yourself room to make mistakes or fail. You don't give people room to be people. I think that's a really big one that sneaks up on people, is just like having unrealistic expectations. Another one that comes with trying to be perfect is the fear of failure. Like it's so weird, because I know on my own, when I'm doing my own stuff and I'm intrinsically motivated, this stuff doesn't really get to me until I'm like working and collaborating with other people, and then all of a sudden like I take on this expectation. But fear of failure becomes a really big thing. Fear of not meeting expectations, fear of being perceived as like a screw up or a good for nothing. That can be really paralyzing, and that can lead people to procrastinate and avoid doing the task altogether. I know a really big thing for me is that I don't like to make decisions that are conditional on something else being done first. That's like a really big thing. So any situation where I have to get approval for something, like that kind of stresses me out, and I'm like, okay, there's a good chance I invested all this time and all this effort, and at the end of the day it's going to go for nothing. So fear of failure is a thing. There's a term that you might be familiar with, and I'm going to try to actually broaden it, but analysis paralysis. If you haven't heard of that term before, it's basically when you are trying to do the right thing. You're trying to have the best outcome. You're trying to make the best, most efficient plan. And you are hyper aware of all the options and all the pathways that you can take. And instead of being able to make a decision efficiently, you spend time stuck analyzing the plan and you never get around to executing it. So that's something that I see a lot in myself, and something that I've seen a lot in people, is that pursuit of perfection prevents people from taking action because they don't give themselves the freedom to make a mistake, and they feel like everything has to be flawless. And that already just sounds exhausting to me. I don't know if it sounds exhausting to you, but it sounds exhausting to me. Speaking of exhausting, the next obstacle that comes with trying to be perfect all the time is that you can easily burn out. Constantly striving to be the best, to be number one, to perform at a super, super high but unachievable standard, that can lead to burnout. That takes a lot of mental energy, physical energy, emotional energy. And when you're being really hard on yourself, it's very easy to neglect your own process. I think that just kind of sheds light on how important it is to set a high but achievable goal. Another obstacle that comes about is not giving yourself the flexibility. So kind of just like what I've been saying about like not giving yourself an opportunity to learn, to grow, to make mistakes. It keeps you from being able to adapt. It keeps you from being able to go through that process of trial and error where you're learning and acting at the same time. In education, that's called like active learning, where you're taking new information, you're putting it into practice, you're creating. Did it work? Did it not work? And then you're kind of doing that whole process again, taking in information, acting, creating. Did it work? Did it not work? And there's something about being willing to go through the mess of it all that allows you to make progress. And when you're striving for perfection, you don't give yourself the elbow room to do that. Another really big thing, and I kind of mentioned this before, but on my own, I feel like I have a realistic view of my strengths and my weaknesses. It doesn't matter how much effort I put in or how motivated or driven I am to do something. At the end of the day, I think music projects are like the biggest one where I can be very, very particular, but I know my skill set also. Like I'm not the best singer. I'm not very musical, all this stuff. So I have like a realistic view of myself. And when you are trying to be perfect and maybe even come off as like an expert in your field enough to create something that is along the lines of whatever your standard is, a big thing that comes up is imposter syndrome. perfectionists will more frequently struggle with that feeling of trying to be something that they're not. I think that's the simplest way to explain that. So I'm going to leave that there. And then the last thing, and this is one of the most annoying things for me, is I feel like a very creative person. And there's something about creativity and the process of trying to be creative at all that because of the mess and because of the flaws, there's something in that chaos that is kind of beautiful and unique, and it produces something, it gives you something. And one of the biggest obstacles I've noticed for me is when I'm trying to meet someone else's expectations, or when I'm trying to produce results with skill sets that I don't have, it keeps me from being creative. And instead of being like, I think we could do this, I think we could do that, I kind of just stay stuck being like, is this allowed? Is this not allowed? Would this be okay? Would this not be okay? And I just end up getting stuck because I'm like, okay, it's just if things are like it. What is that? Yeah, okay, so there's something about striving for perfection that is very black and white. Either it's perfect or it's not. Either it's successful or it's not. And without that middle ground where you have the freedom to just try and do your best, that for me is like where the lack of creativity comes in. And so I was doing some research today, and I wanted to share this website with you guys. It is from the University of Texas. Yeah, and this article is called Perfectionism versus Healthy Striving. And it kind of separated the two, and I love the language here, so I wanted to at least reference it so you guys could check it out if you wanted to. Like I said, University of Texas article, Perfectionism versus Healthy Striving. Okay. So it says, perfectionism is setting standards beyond reach and reason, never being satisfied by anything less than perfection, becoming depressed when faced with failure or disappointment, being preoccupied with fears of failure and disapproval. Yeah, that's me. Seeing mistakes as evidence of unworthiness, becoming overly defensive when criticized. So that's some ways that perfectionism shows up. And then the encouragement for healthy striving would look like setting standards that are high but within reach, enjoying process as well as outcome, bouncing back quickly from failure or disappointment, keeping normal anxiety and fear of failure within bounds, seeing mistakes as opportunities for growth and learning, and reacting positively to helpful criticism. And then I wanted to share some of the coping strategies listed here too, because it gave a handful of pretty good ones. One was to be realistic about what you do. I actually didn't fully read this ahead of time, but I'm kind of glad that what I'm saying is matching this. Having an accurate and realistic view of what you're able to do with what you have, your strengths, your weaknesses, your capabilities, your faults, your flaws, and ultimately being intrinsically motivated to a point where at the end of the day you gave your best effort. If you're realistic about that, that could be a really great coping strategy. Increasing your awareness of the self-critical nature of your all or nothing thoughts and how they extend to other people in your life. So that example that I gave earlier, wow, I'm actually really proud. I feel like I should do this. Okay, anyway, you guys, I have ADD and it's so bad. I'm going to leave this here so that you guys know how I am. But that example that I gave of hot and cold, yes or no, it's good or it's bad, it's perfect or it's not, it's successful or it's not, like that whole thing. When you have that all or nothing mentality, that kind of echoes into the other people around your life. If they love you and they care about you and they know how you are, they're going to try to perform and match you. And even having your own awareness of the way that you react to other people who are always trying to be perfect, for me, that's like a big thing. Is just learning to be aware of that and the way that it's affecting my output is kind of the process that I've been in. Another one, let's see, there's like two. One is just dealing with constructive criticism, like obviously in a healthy way. And then giving yourself a deadline and setting time limits for your projects so that you know that you can't stay stuck wherever it is that you are. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about the different ways that I'm seeing it in my own life so that you might be able to look in on your own life and, pick out the things that might apply to you. Like maybe you're a parent and you want with all your heart to be the best mom or dad that you can be. And maybe you're really hard on yourself when you slip up, when you lose your temper, or when you don't get to accomplish all the plans that you made for a day. Or maybe you're a content creator and you're in the beginning of your process and you're not seeing the results that you hoped for and you're getting discouraged. And let's see. I think those are, I think y'all kind of know what I mean. I just want to encourage you guys to just be aware. I've been reflecting on my own life a lot this past week, and I feel like, I know in previous episodes I mentioned that I'm usually very aware of what's going on in my mind and my heart, but recently I've been seeing a lot of sneaky things popping up, like fear of man and this whole chameleon thing and the striving for perfection thing. Like, it's very easy to not see what's happening within yourself. And there's so many ways that we limit ourselves by trying to achieve something that's not realistic. Or let me give this example because I actually think it's really beautiful, and it kind of goes back to the spiritual way that we could talk about this. But I remember having a conversation with a friend, and years ago I was like, I would never be able to survive this. I would never be able to be this kind of person. I would never be able to show up in this way. And here I am years later. I'm saying things that friends never imagined that I would say. I'm a person that my people never imagined that I would be. And back then, I had the expectation to be something that I wasn't, but something happened in the process of just putting my best effort in day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And when it comes to our spiritual lives, like when we're just starting out in our faith and maybe we don't fully know how to pray or how to read the Bible, or even something as simple as like being holy, like we could be like, I've never seen this. I don't know what it's like to be a good person or a good Christian, or you can like be down on yourself about how you are as a parent, be like, okay, my parents weren't like this. I'm trying to be something that I've never seen. Like that whole thing can be overwhelming. And when you pause and when you settle within yourself that it's okay to just give the best with what you have, make the most with what you know, that is actually really powerful, and it makes a huge difference. And whether you see it or not, you're probably making a lot more progress than you give yourself credit for. So just wanted to shed light on some of the symptoms of perfection, some of the obstacles that come along with it, and hopefully that little bit of, practical tips at the end was helpful also. So love you guys. See you in the next one. Thank you guys so much for listening. Feel free to DM me to send me your feedback. Check out the description below to follow me on social media. This podcast is listener supported. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, you are fully known and deeply loved. I'll see you in the next one.